started working in Pakistan, I was one of those women who were working in Pakistan trying to prove their mark in the energy sector. But then I kind of decided when I got to the place where I had an influence, I would say, I got to the level where then I started empowering other women to come into the energy sector, not just in the private sector space or in the entrepreneurial sector space, but also in the rural villages. So my flagship project, Lighting a Million Lives, which was about providing access to energy to rural villages, was about creating social enterprises in the rural villages that would sell the business of solar. So you have a business, you have a social enterprise, and you sell solar lanterns and you rent them, and there are different models behind that. But when we went into the village, I kind of realized that it would just make economic sense for me if I picked the women in the village and trained them to become my light ladies and make them my Roshna bibis. Roshna means Urdu. Roshna means light in Urdu, and bibi means woman. So they actually became Roshna bibis. And these Roshna bibis were then entrepreneurs in the rural villages selling solar lanterns to their fellow villagers, right? So that led me to empower, not just provide access to energy, but create a beautiful nexus between women empowerment and energy access, which kind of became the international best practice because it affects two of the world's most pressing development solutions.
What does it do for the community environment when you're empowering the women in that context?
So that was very interesting, right? And again, great learnings for us. In Pakistan, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the geographical diversity we have in Pakistan, but we have 4 provinces. And the culture in the 4 provinces is extremely starkly different from each other. So Punjab, where 100 million out of the 200 million, 50% of the population resides, is a much more open culture, where you have where 70% of the women in the rural areas are already working in the fields, be it in football manufacturing or agriculture, but they're actually going out to create some kind of livelihood. So it was much easier to empower the women there. But when we went down into other more conservative provinces like Sindh or Balochistan, we faced serious problems to the extent that the women were given life threats, death threats by their relatives if they continue to be part of the Roshna Bibi campaign. And that led us to understand the fact that it's not just as simple that you go and you set up a solar charging station and you have a training manual and you train the woman and it's done. You have to take consideration of all these social limitations. So then we added other components into our model to make it further kind of tighten it up. And we got gender sensitization trainings imparted to the men in the household. One very interesting thing that we did, which kind of also got marked and acknowledged by the UN later on, was the fact that we trained the male in the household, the men, be it the husband or the son or the brother or the father-in-law, to become the technician of that solar charging station. So he got ownership, he got a very male-dominant role, he felt important, and he started generating additional income for the household. Plus, it was a win-win situation because now I did not have to send my engineer to go down to the field to rectify any bulbs or fix any wires hanging. They could do it themselves. So it actually became sustainable.
So a sociological win as well as a practical win.
Exactly.
So let's get on to the practical side of the power. So you chose power and electricity because that's what was required in the context in which you were operating. But what about the economics of the situation? I mean, how did you deal with the fact that most people seem to believe that these technology solutions are not affordable, are not economically viable, are not scalable? What about all those issues?
So lots of issues came up. I'll just give you another example. The first solar ATM that we sold back in the days, first solar ATM.
What is a solar ATM?
What is a solar ATM?
Why did you set up a solar ATM?
Okay, so it is literally funny. Now it all seems really interesting, but we actually just kind of penned down all the different industries that there are, the prominent ones. We identified the key component that drives their commercial operations. So for a bank, an ATM drives their commercial operations. If their ATM does not operate, the state bank would penalize them. For a dairy company like Nestle, their milk chillers are critical to their operations. For a school, the maintenance of their computer systems or electricity at large during the operating hours is critical. We identified the mission critical components for every industry. And then because that is where they were incurring losses if that went off because of the power.
So then you provide a solution.
So then we provide a solution for the mission critical component only because there's a limitation of land, there's a limitation of roof space, and there's a limitation of capital. So we went to those industries then and we told them that we will convert your ATMs to solar, we will convert your milk chillers to solar, because these are that infrastructure that you need to run 24/7 to generate good business. And the commercial viability of that capex that they were putting in or the payback was obviously maximum because you're targeting their mission critical business component, ATM or milk chiller. Later on, and as an example, when we sold our first solar ATM, and this is all pure selling on capex because there's no financing at that time, that was sold at 195 rupees per watt. Today, the price that we sell a watt at in Pakistan, and I just came a week before coming, we commissioned a 12.5 megawatt commercial project. Today, the price stands at 79 rupees per watt. So from 190 to 180, 190 to 79 rupees per watt. The industry has evolved tremendously. But with that, we also then started working with State Bank of Pakistan to get financing options available. So 5 years down the lane in my kind of entrepreneurial journey, we were able to convince State Bank to launch green financing, which is now in operation. And you can get a loan at 2% for a 10-year loan for a solar project.
Why do you make it sound so simple when the rest of the world is still sitting there saying this stuff is not viable?
Well, it's that's the entrepreneur in me. And that's what I believe in. I believe the problem is very complicated.
Does it frustrate you that you look around the world, you look in other countries in your region, perhaps even within your own country, and you're seeing people still not buying the idea that this stuff works?
Yes, it does frustrate me at times, yet I'm an optimist by nature. So I like to look at things that are being done. And it took us a decade to get this ecosystem established, right? From the point where nobody could hear solar, nobody could see solar panel anywhere, to the point now in Pakistan where 12.5 megawatts just got commissioned last week. Many residential customers are moving to solar. You can see solar readily available. People know about solar, they're talking about solar. So it's always, for an entrepreneur like me, it's always more about the possibilities and the problems rather than, the challenges.
But what you're saying is that solar does work.
Simple. It does work.
Is it going to work across the whole country? I mean, Pakistan still has major problems. What's the end game here?
So the end game for Pakistan's renewable energy equation is solar. The wind belts are only predominantly located in the south. So you are geographically limited to install wind beyond a certain capacity. But solar, Pakistan lies in the most beautiful, stunning solar belt of the world, I believe, with 19 megajoules of energy per day of sunshine. So currently our deficit, the total deficit is 6,000 megawatts. And the solar potential that has been estimated for the country is 100,000 megawatts. So if we're ever able to utilize our solar potential, we could be exporters of energy. Forget about being in a deficit.
Isn't that the whole problem, though? The potential is a theoretical potential.
Yes.
The deficit is a real deficit.
Yes.
How do you bridge the distance between the two?
By practical actions at every level and tier of the society. So again, being an entrepreneur, I think that everybody needs to play their part. So if you're in a rural village, the solution is absolutely different for you. If you're running a corporation or a bank or a commercial entity or an industry, industries are going on solar. We've just set up, I think 6 or 7 1 megawatt projects across various industries, from dairy to metal production to textiles. Industries are converting on solar as well because people are just realizing that it's not just a thing that makes you look good or gets environmental benefits, but it's actually making economic sense. Because with the whole energy deficit, people in Pakistan are forced to adapt to diesel generators, which are extremely costly, or battery-operated inverters, which are not only unreliable, but they're also expensive. So going on solar is just the sensible thing to do now. And people are realizing that by more and more best practices coming out.
This solution, or this kind of thinking, can't be implemented, can't be actioned by individuals alone. You need to be talking about building relationships between multiple stakeholders in that system.
Yes.
How do you build those relationships, and how do you primarily get people to work together towards the same aim?
So that's kind of what I'm focusing on now. As you rightly said, I wouldn't say that individuals can't do it on their own. They can, but then now is the time for scale. We have best practices. We know where the technology is. The price of the technology has fallen down. It is making an absolute environmental, social, and commercial case. So they're all ticked and checked. Now, to actually execute in practicality, we need to bring the different stakeholders together. And they all need to play their individual roles. So the work that I'm doing now as an advisor in Pakistan and in the region is to bring these stakeholders together, because the governments are trying to address the climate change issue in their own little silo with policy making, but their policies are far from the practicality that the private sector needs to actually get down to implementing solar. For example, in Pakistan, we've recently implemented net metering, which has been taken as a tremendous hit by the private sector, because they are, and schools are implementing solar vastly now because they have a very good commercial gain with the net metering component. Similarly, the green financing that we got the government to kind of facilitate. Every stakeholder needs to play its part to put the puzzle together. And we can only achieve that scale if the stakeholders come together now, because we all know what needs to be done. But instead of doing it in our own little silos, we need to create that collaborative impact.
And what is the most important element of creating impact? Is there a technology? Is there a weak point? Is there a solution that you think is most essential for everyone to begin with?
Well, I think the most important component is actually making it demand-driven and practicality, because you need to really address the issue at hand. In my experience, solar has been the universal solution across my different tiers. But you might, when you go into your target market in another country, there might be another solution or an adaptability of the solar proposition that would work better. So I think the most critical component is to understand the demand, the problem equation first, and then to come up with simple solutions that address that problem. Because I always feel, and you rightly said, that this whole energy dynamic has become a very complex, integrated problem with multi-dimensional issues surrounding it. But if you look at the solutions, they're very simple. And you just need to start implementing those solutions one by one and addressing and make it demand-driven, really. That's the word, to make it demand-driven.
Where is the weakest point in the matrix here? Is it regulation? Is it private sector interest? Is it financial inclusion? Is it social and cultural components?
Well, I think financial inclusion, if you look at the tier, financial inclusion would be the weakest, because again, the private sector would come in with X percentage of the financial investments that are required for this industry to flourish. Banks or the whole green financing will take it to a certain point as well. In Pakistan, for example, the loan is applicable for up to 1 megawatt for 10 years. So to go beyond that, if you're talking about hundreds of megawatts of solar energy, we need to have more and more inflow of financial instruments to come in, which again is going to be a good investment proposition as well. So it's a win-win. If structured properly and with the right kind of term sheets, it's going to actually, it serves to be a win-win proposition for the investor as well. And the world of financial investors are understanding this too. And we're getting, even in Pakistan, in a country like Pakistan, we're getting many international investors come in with huge amounts of money they want to put into the renewable energy sector.
For you, what is the hardest part of getting something done in Pakistan? What is the most difficult aspect about implementing a clean energy solution in the environment?
Well, there were lots of hard aspects when we started doing the work, from convincing the government. For example, even till now, I think we succeeded highly in the off-grid space in the rural villages. We succeeded very well with the private sector space, but I think we've not succeeded as well with the government sector and with the solar IPP industry, which we tried to for many years back to back, but I don't think we achieved that result. So there's a lot of resistance from the government, which is now changed with the new government in Pakistan, because the new government's kind of primary mandate is climate change and energy sustainability, because again, they have realized that the lack of energy is not just a social or environmental issue anymore. It's actually impacting the country's GDP, because without energy, the industry is not functioning. Without industry and agriculture, the GDP is not growing. So it's all the baseline has been boiled down to energy. And now it has become a national priority. So hence, I think those initial bottlenecks that we experienced will also be resolved, because it's now become a national federal priority.
Let's leave it there.
Good.
Thank you.
Done. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. The light's fine.